Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's online dialogue hosted by Rails to Trails Conservancy. My name is Isabel Lord. I'm the Advocacy Coordinator here at RTC and your co-host today alongside my esteemed colleague, Kim Chesser, who is RTC's State Agency Advocacy Specialist. Due to the interactive structure of today's session, we encourage you to engage with your peers via the chat box before we move into breakout groups at the end of the session. To make this easier, please update your name on Zoom to include your name, the state you reside in, and your organization's affiliation. As many of you know, transportation alternatives can vary widely by state, and this will help give us all some context as we interact today. This will also help us organize everyone into breakout groups. You can see how mine is formatted at the bottom of my video. Please note that we are recording today's session for our own notes and will only be publishing a recording of the presentation portion of today. We hope that this allows us all to speak more freely in the breakouts and discussion portion as we work together to address shared challenges. Next slide, please. All right, so our topic for today is opportunities and innovation with transportation alternatives funding implementation. During this session, you'll learn more about the Transportation Alternatives Data Exchange, or TrADE, which is a resource that helps stakeholders at the federal, state, and local levels understand and make effective use of the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program, or TASA. During the dialogue, we will cover strategies, including focusing on larger strategic projects, promoting equity through technical assistance and match assistance, maintenance, and using trail and active transportation networks to fulfill safety goals. Before I introduce our panelists, let's review the structure of today's session, as it's a bit different than our traditional webinars. To start, Kim Chesser will outline RTC's recently released TrADE report, which is an important tool for states, regions, and active transportation professionals to understand spending patterns and strengthen the program, thus improving the efficiency and impact of investments made. You will then hear from our panelists before engaging in a dialogue with partners who are taking advantage of this vital time for progress and new opportunities as a result of the recent changes from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to accelerate the development of trail and active transportation systems and ensure more equitable access to funds. Now moving on to our panelists, and next slide, please. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Noah Heath, who serves as the Transportation Alternatives Program Manager at the Texas Department of Transportation, and Ashley Moran, who is the planner at the Acadiana Planning Commission in Lafayette, Louisiana. Noah and Ashley will present on how their regions are innovatively using TA funds before moderating breakout rooms. Additionally, Joe Delmagori, the Senior Transportation Planner at the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, and David Haleen, apologies, could you, next slide? Thank you so much. And David Haleen, the Transportation Alternatives Engineer at the Montana Department of Transportation, will moderate breakout rooms. We are lucky to have their expertise during our discussion. I want to take a moment to go through some brief housekeeping. The chat is open and enabled, and my colleagues on the call are filtering out questions for our large group discussion at the end. Please feel free to add your questions to the chat as we proceed. If you have specific technical assistance questions for us, please follow up with an email after today's session. We will also be including a link in the chat. Finally, we'll close today's session with a short survey. Your thoughts and feedback are crucial to our work and allow us to build programming that is responsive to your needs and highlights the incredible work happening across the country. Before I hand it over to Kim, we ask that you respond to this poll so that you will be placed in a breakout room with other individuals in your field of work. The poll should be popping up on your screen momentarily. If it does not, please let us know in the chat.
We got the poll up.
All right, we're good.
Let's see, we still got some people answering. Here we go. Okay. Just gonna give 2 more seconds. We would love everybody to just pick an option in the poll. If you don't see one that exactly fits, trail managers and other advocates should probably encompass what you do. And again, this is how we will assign breakout rooms. So we're just gonna, okay, all right. I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Thank you, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you, Yvonne. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to Kim, today's moderator and facilitator, to get started.
Great, thank you, Isabel. Rails to Trails Conservancy has monitored for more than 30 years how these transportation alternative funds have been invested and the projects that have been built. This annual Transportation Alternative Spending Report helps stakeholders at the federal, state, and local levels understand and make effective use of the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program. It provides transparency, promotes best practices, and provides citizens, professionals, and policymakers with information and access to funding data. Can we advance the slide, please? Great, thank you very much. Okay, and so our data sources for this presentation, or for this report, I'm sorry, are the FHWA Financial Management Information System and RTC's direct data requests to State Department of Transportation staff. FY22 was the first year of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law implementation. This report gives the first indication of how states are responding to the changes in bill. Next slide, please. Here we have a flow diagram of the distribution of funds for TASA, the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside, which is the largest dedicated source of funding for trails, walking, and bicycling in the United States since 1991. This program, formerly known as Transportation Enhancements, has transformed the landscape of the country. While projects in several categories, including eligibility such as historic preservation and highway beautification, are eligible for funding from this program, the consistent leading priority since the program's inception has been the improvement of conditions for walking and bicycling. So two changes under bill include an increase in suballocated funds to MPOs, which went from 50% to 59%, reducing the amount of funding for use in any area of a state from 50% to 41%. The second change to note is that transfers have become extremely limited. Under bill, before a state may transfer funds from TASA to another federal aid apportioned category, the FHWA must certify that the state held a competitive grant opportunity in compliance with TASA guidance and offered and upon request provide technical assistance, as well as demonstrated that there were not sufficiently suitable applications from eligible entities to use the funds to be transferred. In the first year under bill, FHWA prohibited transfers, and as a result, no inter-program transfers were made in FY22. Now, this is noteworthy because it means that all the funding allocated remains available for its intended purpose. The rest of this diagram follows the pattern established under Map 21. Next slide, please. The figure shows this figure shows a national overview of funding amounts by phase from the last decade. Apportionment is the first step of the funding process, where funds are distributed across the country. Obligations represent a significant step in the project implementation process, during which FHWA commits to reimburse states for the federal share of the cost of selected projects. Inter-program transfers allow funding to be transferred to another federal aid highway program and used for non-transportation alternative eligibilities. Funding levels at each phase of this cycle serve as a key benchmark that provides an overview of the program from the apportionment of funds through project reimbursement. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the FY22 highlights. We had a total of $1.38 billion apportioned to the states for the TA program in fiscal year FY22. And this is in contrast to $850 million in FY21. As I mentioned, FHWA had a prohibition on inter-program transfers for FY22, and after nearly a decade of high numbers of transfers, FHWA established a first-year moratorium on states diverting TASA funds for purposes outside program eligibilities in advance of implementing new restrictions on transfers. Obligation rates were 60% of apportioned rates, with the rate staying steady from FY21, but below the long-term average. In FY22, the national obligation rate for MPOs was 54%. lower than the 67% rate for state agencies. Approximately $540 million were reimbursed in FY22, marking the completion of projects to the return of funds advanced by local communities. Because of the increase in funding over the next 5 years, states now have a golden opportunity to make significant progress on the backlog of active transportation projects. To account for the increase in overall apportionment, states will need to obligate funds at increased level. We noticed that the obligation rate for MPOs was lower than for state agencies, and through the policy change in bill, MPOs receive a larger allocation of TA funds, so more is at stake in determining why the obligation rates are lower. This is something that RTC and AMPO are looking at. Shortly, you'll hear from Ashley, who's going to share some of the innovative work that they are doing through her MPO. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the key takeaways here are that there are several policy changes to be aware of and plan for. Even though the obligation rate stayed steady as a percentage from FY21, there was more money to obligate, so in absolute terms, state obligations were higher. But if you look at obligated funding, it's not as high as we expected. Some states are holding off on spending new funds and are using previous year's resources. Some are using this time to review FHWA guidance, and some states are funding TA projects every other year. In the next cycle, you'll see more of the actual obligations of the new money. We see that some states are very well aware of the changes in bill, and they're ready with projects and able to assign funding. It goes back to project readiness. Having projects in the pipeline that are ready to start construction is very helpful. How ready is this project to hit the ground is key to getting all of the funding streamlined and show the actual need. States should be strategic and look for ways to plug holes in their current system, considering how do we consciously make a decision to build out in our state. In addition to the increase in TA funds, there's also more grant opportunities than ever for trails and active transportation. So project readiness is key. If your state wants to maintain or increase TA obligations, you should be looking to build a multi-year project pipeline that are ready to begin construction. So 2 new aspects of TASA have the potential to make the process more equitable for communities accessing TA funds. First, states may now use up to 5% of their TA allocation to provide technical and application assistance. States should be developing a plan to focus that money in areas of needs. States may use these funds to provide application assistance, technical assistance, and assistance in reducing the amount of time between project selection and obligation of funds for the projects. States can also assist MPOs with their processes. And in a few minutes, you'll hear from Noah, who will share with you what they've been doing in Texas. So additionally, a change to the matching requirements could provide relief for low-income communities struggling to meet the also often elusive matching dollars to unlock TA. Previously, states were required to meet a 20% match for all projects. And I note that there are a few states with sliding scales on match requirements based on the amount of federal land in their state. Bill now allows states to average a 20% match across their full portfolio of TA projects. So you can use this opportunity to assess equity needs and use this flexibility to adjust match rates based upon community needs and access to capital. Combined with new or increased technical assistance programs, communities that may have previously struggled to meet the TA matching requirements may become more able to access funds to improve the safety and quality of life for their residents. Communities across the country are acknowledging the need for interconnected active transportation networks. These projects have the potential to transform communities for the better in a myriad of ways, from mobility justice to carbon reduction to public health outcomes. They're ambitious projects, and with strategic investment that prioritizes filling critical gaps to advance interconnected active transportation networks, the projects have the potential to yield tremendous positive outcomes. These projects are often the most expensive projects, so states should consider a large grant category to fund these types of projects. Funding can also be used for trail maintenance and restoration. Recreational trail projects that would be eligible under the RTP are also eligible under the Surface Transportation Block Grant and under TASA. This seems to be one of the lesser known changes with Bill. States should consider this now before additional funding comes in and develop a trail maintenance plan. And FHWA has guidelines available on their website that can be very helpful. So in conclusion, we're getting an early indication that some states are taking steps to implement the changes in bill already, but we should see states continuing to focus money strategically for maximum impact as they obligate more funds in the next cycle. So now I'd like to turn the webinar over to Noah so you can hear about the great work that Texas is doing.
Kim. Next slide. Right, and then one more slide. So I'll give everyone a quick overview of TxDOT's TA program and how it was changed, or how much additional funding we received because of the latest transportation bill. I'll also talk about our technical assistance approach and what we've put in place and are doing to assist communities with submitting applications, and then also as we move forward with projects that are awarded, how we're helping those projects be developed and obligate those funds in a quick way. And then I'll talk about how we use technical assistance and some of the new aspects for our latest call for projects that we're in the middle of. We're targeting an October award, so that's coming to a conclusion, but I'll talk about how we're working through that. Next slide. So just an overview of our program since 2015. You can see that we were focused on the sub-allocated areas, small urban and non-urban. Those are the number of projects and the funding that was awarded since 2015. We administer a call every 2 years. So we awarded funds in 2015, 2017, 2019, and 2021. And then as we continue, we have our current call 2023. But we focused that funding on bicycle and pedestrian facilities, so bike lanes, shared use paths, sidewalks. Those were the type of the projects. They usually ranged between $1 and $2 million. Sometimes we had a little bit bigger projects, sometimes smaller. We didn't limit or have a upper threshold, but we had funding. We had it spread across the whole state. So they usually came out to about $1 million, $1.5 million. Under bill, our annual TA funding increased significantly. Part of it was just the increased funds for the TA program, but then, as Kim mentioned, the limitation of transferring funds really increased the amount of funds that our program was managing. Before bill, TxDOT flexed a lot of those funds out for other priorities, and so they were not used on these transportation alternative projects. So the way that our FY23 distribution shook out is about $51 million went to MPOs. MPOs, they administer their own TA funds in Texas, and there's about 10 of those in Texas. So quite a large portion of funding goes to the MPOs. TxDOT, we received $13 million for communities of less than 5,000. So we got a pretty large amount of money, and we're focused on that because those tend to be the hardest projects to implement. So we have various technical assistance initiatives focused on those smaller communities. About $6 million to the communities of 5,000 to 50,000, $8 million to 50,000 to 200, and then we have about $50 million with any area funds. And so that with 5% of that being available for technical assistance, we have a budget of about $4 million to provide that technical assistance. Next slide. So our approach, we really wanted to tackle how best to use this technical assisted funds to really make the whole process more efficient and ensure that local governments were getting the needed assistance to participate in the TA program. So we were able to hire some new staff to assist with program administration, as well as a new engineering contract with a consultant. We also wanted to focus on application assistance, and then once projects are awarded, project delivery. We focus the technical assistance and prioritize it for communities that are economically disadvantaged in smaller communities. So we made a lot of the tools and assistance available to everyone, but if there's limited resources, we focus and prioritize the smaller communities and communities with economic, that are considered economically disadvantaged. Next slide. So we worked with the NPOs to identify technical assistance needs. A lot of the needs that we had identified through previous program calls, they also identified those needs. We focused on smaller disadvantaged communities. We enhanced our two-step application process. So we allow project sponsors to submit a preliminary application. We review that. Our districts meet with them and provide feedback for how they can improve their application. We used the engineering consultant that we were able to hire through that technical assistance funds to help review their budgets and their applications and give them like technical advice on how to improve their project and their application. And then again, they meet with TxDOT staff to go over those improvements. We also have been making transportation development credits available for project sponsors that qualify. They can use those TDCs in lieu of local match. So communities are allowed to use 100% federal reimbursement when we apply those transportation development credits to their projects. And this really increased the number of applicants we got from smaller communities. We always had struggled to get enough applicants for smaller communities. And so we after we implemented that, we were able to really increase the number of applications we receive from smaller communities. And we also make sure that they know if they qualify or not before we apply, before they submit their application. So we have a map that shows all the communities that qualify. And I think I saw in the chat, someone had asked, what are the metrics? It's a statewide metric that TxDOT has used in the past for their economic disadvantaged county program. And it looks at unemployment rate, per capita income, and then I think the per capita property tax value in the communities. And if they're below or above average, depending on the metric, for all three of those, then the whole county qualifies. But we took that analysis and went down to the smaller community size level. So if there's a community that was economically disadvantaged within a county that was not, we wanted to make sure they had opportunity to access those transportation development credits. Next slide. So we developed several tools that were just aids or resources that applicants could use during the application process. The number one thing that we heard from the NPOs and that we experienced ourselves is help with construction cost estimate. We want to make sure that there's enough funding in the project once it's implemented to fund the whole project, and that they don't run out of money and then it becomes an issue with if they can afford to cover those overruns. So we we developed that tool. We have a video module that just speaks to the unique aspects of the program. We have video modules and guidance on good application preparation. We're coming out with guidance for certain coordination items like initiating railroad coordination. We found in a lot of our projects, if they were crossing a railroad, that was a barrier for many communities because they didn't have information or guidance on how to reach out to the railroad and get the railroad's permission to use the right of way and all of the things that you have to do when a railroad's involved. So we developed guidance for that. We're working on guidance on project delivery for local governments. We have a local government project team here at TxDOT, but then also that has guidance and training for local governments, but we also want to supplement that with a more project-specific guidance so we can give each project sponsor when their project is awarded. Next slide. And then we have a comprehensive engineering contract, and so we work with a consultant to assist with the project tracking so that we're better able to identify key milestones and if they're meeting milestones throughout the project. So we can early on identify projects that are not going to meet their obligation dates, and we can take corrective action kind of early on so that we make sure that project gets back on track. Project implementation. So like if there's some sort of bottleneck in implementation, like they need a survey or design review, we help out districts with our TxDOT districts with design review. If there's a backlog and they need help with reviewing plan sets submitted by the local government, anything we can do to sort of remove these log jams that slow down project development. And for certain communities, we've had the engineer just go ahead and create the plan set for them instead of them hiring a consultant and going through that procurement process and all of the things that can delay through that. And then assistance with project management. So preparing our TA coordinators. Each district has a transportation alternatives coordinator, preparing them for the roles and duties of that job. Assisting with program management, which if that's the local government or the district, scheduling projects so that we realistically have a let date on that project and can make sure we're meeting that. Assisting with application development, and then the district review meetings for that preliminary application. Next slide. So with the additional funding that was made available through the bill and made available to our program, we were able to develop some new project categories. So the community base was our original project category, but we also were able to develop the large scale. So these are $5 to $25 million projects that are really, our goal is to fund some transformative projects that really eliminate huge barriers to bike ped access in a community, improve access in a transformative way. Network enhancements, these are smaller projects that enhance existing networks. So safety projects, enhanced crosswalks, pedestrian signal installation, bike share networks, and then also planning documents. We noticed that some of our smaller communities needed help with identifying good projects to submit to our program for construction. So we wanted to provide some funding for communities that need that to develop active transportation plans. Next slide. So we really received a huge amount of applications which is good because we definitely met that threshold. We're not going to transfer any of the funds because we definitely have a need and have more eligible and quality projects than we can fund. We got 319 applications with this last call, requesting $1.4 billion worth of funding. That table breaks it down amongst our project categories and then where we got the applications throughout the state of Texas. Next slide. And so for this call for projects, Kim mentioned getting ahead of project obligation, and that's what we're attempting to do. We're targeting $336 million that we're making available through this call. So all of our FY22 through FY26 funds that we have available that haven't been committed to other projects, we are planning to award those through this call so that we are able to, once we receive money from FHWA, we have projects ready to go. So that's our goal with this. And this is sort of a timeline for our call for projects. We have the preliminary application, we provide feedback, and then they submit their detail. We're kind of in that review time right here, and we're anticipating an October award. Next slide. So this is our team. We were able to hire Matthew and Annette within the last year, and then Carl has in-house consultant support. So that's my presentation. I'll be excited to discuss what other DOTs are doing in our breakout. And now I'll hand it over to Ashley.
Thank you, Noah. That's great. There's a lot of good examples here that other states can emulate, and I appreciate you taking the time to be a part of the webinar and share this information. And we'll turn it over to Ashley.
Hi, so I'm going to talk a lot about the collaborations that we've done with different coalitions and different groups working towards increasing our pedestrian and bike infrastructure and just really promoting walking and biking as a mode choice. So next slide. So we have a lot of coalitions kind of running around our state with different missions, different objectives, but we're really just trying to show people that and just get out in the community and provide education and information on how important it is to choose walking instead of a vehicle trip, just for overall for your public health we've done some step challenges, partnered with the Department on Health on just providing that education out there. In general, we have some goals with our Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a TMA. So we do fall under a separate subcategory for TAP funding. We have objectives to reduce traffic. So that's a big thing. We want to get those vehicles off the road. And then obviously carbon reduction. That's another new funding source from the federal government that we're trying to leverage to promote these facilities. And then equity considerations. And that's something that's a newer conversation. I'm really glad it's been highlighted because it's a big issue in our community. We do have a lot of transportation disadvantaged census tracts. And so we have a lot of people that are members of zero-car households. And so we need to make sure that they have safe access, not only just for their internal trips, but also to improve their access to our transit system. Next slide. So we're working together with a variety of different partners, and all the people listed here are all, kind of part of the same group that we've been just trying to leverage all of our resources to build out our bike and pedestrian infrastructure, primarily through our TAP program, since that's the largest source of bike and pedestrian infrastructure funding that we have just solely dedicated for that, or primarily dedicated for that purpose from our state DOT. We're very lucky that our Highway Safety Improvement Program Manager for our state actually used to be the TAP program manager. So they're really coordinating with their programs and providing just joint technical assistance to our local governments to develop these type of projects. So the state HSIP program is also required, because we are a focus state for bike and pedestrian crashes, to provide vulnerable roadway user projects to address bike and pedestrian safety. But we want to do it in a conjunction with other TAP projects and other bike and pedestrian projects that are occurring around the state. just so, you know, we build a network and we build a coordinated planned effort. And then we also have a highway safety coalition that is funded through the state DOT that provides, you know, resources to communities for TAP projects, provides education and awareness, that important component of how you operate on a pedestrian network safely. This is how you cross that intersection. This is what the signals are for. And it's just some extra awareness, primarily to children and young adults, but, you know, also to anyone in the community that would like to hear it. So we were also working with our Louisiana Department of Health. They received some funding from the Walkability Action Institute, and they're kind of, you know, they're more focused on the health aspects of it. But again, they're a great partner for working with our communities to develop complete streets projects and, you know, basically set up programs for projects for receiving these TAP funds. And then our Ag Extension Center utilizes SNAP Ed funds to fund healthy living coalitions. And so they have different objectives. They have their own action plans. One part of their action plan is to increase the amount of pedestrian infrastructure in order to encourage people to walk or bike instead of getting in their vehicle. Next slide. So this is just some examples from our Healthy Living Coalition. Right here is a picture, which you'll see on the right is a picture of Ron Chakowski. That's our highway safety community coordinator, providing some education and some resources in conjunction with other members, 4-H, and some, you know, other high school people associated with high schools in the community, and talking about what we can do to increase safety and pedestrian infrastructure in our community. If you kind of see right there, you'll see some people wearing some fun vests. That's Jessica Stroop. She is with the Ag Center in Baton Rouge, and she's our pretty much the statewide coordinator for working with these smaller communities, especially because they receive significantly, they obligate significantly less of the TAP funds. And that's kind of what we're targeting right here. And she's worked together with the state in order to develop a program. So the state will provide cash to match the TAP funds for those smaller size communities. And that will just really increase the state's ability to spend those TAP funds for those less than 5,000 designated in communities. So that's been a big thing right there. We're doing a walk audit in a community that would qualify for those programs in order to identify projects in their community in order to receive these funds. And this is just some other kind of general things that they do, other pictures associated with what they do to promote healthy eating and such in the community. Next slide. So this is a great program that they have called the Walkability Action Institute, and that's a national program, and some of your communities might have experienced working with them. They're funded through the CDC, but they have the same mission, pretty much to go out and work with the communities, and especially these smaller communities. So they identified about 5 to 10 smaller communities in our state, because our larger communities really are very much able and have the capacity, have the expertise to develop out our TAP funds. It's really our smaller communities that need assistance in developing pedestrian projects and then identifying local match funds in order to obtain these federal funds. So we went out and we're looking at doing some demonstration projects. We're drafting complete street ordinances. And then so we're excited because we're working in a community called Sunset that's a little bit north of Lafayette. And we're going to be doing, you might see right here, you see some small little dieting of the road in order to encourage a safe crosswalk. We're working with the city of Baldwin, which is in St. Mary Parish, a little bit south of here, in order to do ADA compliance walk. So we're going to walk around the streets and we're going to identify ADA problems in there and how we're going to fund those, you know, possibly using TAP funds. And then we're also working with the city of Franklin in order to do a fun crosswalk on a local street to encourage people to use that and then possibly build out other infrastructure in the community. But we're really excited. We have the DOT, which is our state DOT, has partnered with us on every step of the way and on our local and district and state offices. So they're really working with us to identify these locations, identify these projects, fund them through TAP, highway safety if possible, even though that has separate requirements. And then even if our NPO funds allow us to, we will participate in the funding. I think that's it.
We had some questions come in through the chat, so I wanted to direct those to our panelists. So let me get to those. So this is a question for Noah. Noah, if you wouldn't mind hopping back on. This is a question from Brian. What are TDCs or transportation development credits? How do you get them?
So the transportation development credits are tied to toll roads. So states and MPOs get credit from FHWA for those toll roads. And so TxDOT gets a portion of them, and the MPO that it's located in also gets a portion. And then you can use those for local match requirements for federal funds. And so we had to get that authorized through TxDOT that they wanted to allow us to use them for our program. And then if your state has toll roads, and your DOT probably has those credits.
And we have a question from Ella in the chat. Curious to know if anyone is using rapid flashing beacons at trail or road crossings. Does anyone have any insight on that?
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, we're doing that in Michigan, especially with safe routes to school projects.
We do
Awesome.
see a lot of them in PA and New Jersey. Although there's been some concerns that, they're often not enough, that they do help. But a lot of times when they're crossing, major county roads or state roads, additional traffic calming is needed. But we do see them used pretty frequently in New Jersey, New York, New Jersey and PA.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey. We have about 1 more minute. If anyone would like to come off of mute and ask a question for any of our panelists or for anyone else in the session, we encourage you to do so. Give people a few seconds to do that if they need to. And yes, Ella, you can absolutely follow up with questions over email. All right, we have actually a question from Bob in the chat. This will be our last question. Under maintenance, purchase of equipment, are there concerns by state DOTs over inventory and maintenance of funded equipment?
This is Dave with Montana. I think I can answer that one. I could be wrong, but I don't think that funding maintenance equipment, I guess Montana hasn't done that. Typically that type of maintenance activity is typically ineligible for federal aid funding. What we've done in Montana though is we've funded pavement preservation projects. So kind of maintenance, but it's fog seal, crack seal, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Christopher, for the resources in the chat. We appreciate those. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank our presenters, Ashley and Noah, for sharing today, as well as our moderators, Joe and Dave, for leading meaningful discussions. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. Have a great day.